Salutaters, my potats, it is I, Rave, and I am back with another episode of Read with Rave, a series in which I read books or short stories written by myself or by some of my friends. A couple of small disclaimers. Disclaimer number one, I have already gotten permission from my friends to read their books or short stories so as to avoid copyright. That being said, I will have links to their social media down in the description below. Disclaimer number two, these books and short stories are not meant for children. The average audience is teens or young adults, so if you are a young child, please jump off this video and return when I have gaming or art videos. Today, I will be reading The Crossroads Planet, Book 1 of the Crossroads series by Robert Field. Part 2, Chapter 9. Crystal awoke from a pleasant and non-magical dream. She lay on Lance's bed, in Lance's room, and Lance lay curled up at her back with his arms around her, faintly snoring. She lay still for a moment, as she always did after awakening, to drink in his presence, to contemplate the ever-growing relationship that they shared. She slipped gently out of bed, retrieved her robe from a peg on the back of the door, and tiptoed out into the sitting room. She picked up a pouch of sweet herbs and her new mug, part of a his and hers set she'd bought in town. Hers was shaded in pastel pinks, while his was done in deep reds. She set off to the pantry to brew some tea. After several days of classes, a routine had begun to set in. Crystal generally woke first and started her day with a hot drink, while Lance remained asleep until first bell. She sat at her desk and opened her computer to review yesterday's class notes. She looked at how low the battery indicator was and thought about how many spare power packs she had. She was using the computer rather intensively, trying to catch up in the courses that she had joined that were already in progress. She brought up the journal that she was keeping and added an entry to it for yesterday, then looked at the calendar for today. This afternoon, Mary's special exercise section met again, and this time Lance would be with her. She started a journal entry for today and put some notes into it regarding her hopes and fears. She looked at the battery indicator again and pondered. One of the magic exercises had been to draw one variety of spirit filament which had magnetic properties if the energy was concentrated in it. The class had been practicing picking up iron bars by forming the filament into a helix and using the magnetic flux thus generated. Then an idea came to her. On shipboard, many walls or work surfaces contained no physical openings, power being instead transferred by means of small induction coils. Such an induction coil was contained in the accessory pack that she had gotten with the computer, and used on shipboard to recharge the power packs from the ship's power. She fetched the power converter and studied it for a moment. It had a status indicator on it that would report its operation. Just now, it was dark. It had several power outlets, into which the computer itself or a standalone recharger could be plugged. She plugged the computer into it, and in a moment it drew a little power from the computer and lit up the status indicator to say that no external power was present. Out of curiosity, she used her spirit sight and could detect an unmistakable thread of power flowing from the computer to the converter. Fascinating, she thought. So magic and science did share a common framework. She concentrated and summoned a small helix of magnetic threads and oriented it on the converter's receptor. For a moment nothing happened, and she increased the energy levels slightly. Then the receptor began to hum as it did when absorbing ship's power, and the status indicator showed an external power source, but of a voltage too low to be useful. She gradually tapped more spirit power, until the voltage was in a usable range, holding it steady before it became too great. Too much energy, and the power converter would crowbar, shut down completely. The computer indicated that it was recharging the power pack, and predicted a full charge in 1 hour. She looked at the time, half an hour to first bell, and used a technique recommended by one of the textbooks for holding a filament's configuration steady for a medium length of time in order to free one's concentration. She could feel the small drain on her own energy maintaining the spell, and sipped her tea while she continued to organize her notes and thoughts. The battery indicator rose steadily. Before long, first bell sounded, and Lance came padding out of the bedroom. They tended to alternate bedrooms. Crystal liked his bedroom because it was his, and he liked her bedroom because it was hers. Generally, the decision of whose bedroom was made by whoever had the notion of going to bed first, and invariably chose the other's room, unless it was for a short nap that the other was not expected to join. Crystal did not rise up for fear of disturbing the spell, and Lance came over to her. "Using the computer so much, dear? Thee'll be out of power in a month at this rate." Crystal smiled and laughed teasingly. "No, I won't. Look." She pointed first at the battery indicator, then at the power converter. Lance stared dumbly. "Don't you see? Silly, use your spirit sight." She did so herself, to be rewarded with the sight of the filament helix pouring its energy into the converter's receptor. The converter itself was bathed in a glow of energy, and the cord to the computer pulsed with power flowing into the computer. Lance evidently saw it too, for he looked at her, and then smiled broadly. "Damn, thee's good. Thee wasn't taught all that in class, was thee?" "No, but they taught us how to make the helix and generate magnetic forces. I just thought to use the converter's receptor. The power pack will be recharged before breakfast." Lance shook his head. "Thee's becoming quite the witch woman, thee knows. Didn't know thee could magic a computer, though. Always thought magic and science were two different animals." "Apparently not. The computer itself generates and uses things that looks very much like energy filaments when observed by spirit sight." As a matter of fact, by concentrating on her computer, she could see little clouds of energies occupying the same space as the computer, outlining what she knew to be the battery, processor, memory, and other circuits. "Actually, the thought just came to me. I hadn't thought before of how to recharge the packs." Breakfast bell sounded just as the charging was completing, and she dismissed the spirit filament, grateful for the cessation of minor energy drain on herself. The morning passed swiftly after that. Breakfast, classes, and lunch, and then Lance and Crystal were headed out of the east lawn, at the edge of which stood a fenced practice yard. Mary had explained that only undergraduate magics could be safely practiced here, and that the upper-class budding magi had to go a day's travel beyond the town where the annex stood, a one-time outpost now converted for teaching and demonstrating the more dangerous and advanced lessons, ones requiring magic shielding to protect the wielder. The undergraduate exercises were gentler by comparison, and the master or his assistants could be relied on to contain any untowed energies. Even so, the College of Magic was away from town, and still further away from main campus of the university. They entered the small yard and sat down. Crystal was relaxed and confident, but Lance was nervous and tense. She rubbed his shoulders and murmured in his ear, "Relax, my love. It doesn't do to get tense before practicing magic. I'll be here to facilitate you. Remember that we're a team now." He relaxed somewhat, and then they turned to pay attention to the opening discourse. Crystal, meanwhile, concentrated on Lance. She relaxed and tried to project some of her confidence into him. In a moment, she felt the dream state beginning to take hold, but checked it before it could envelop her. Like a cloud, it appeared to float free before them. She nudged a little higher, so she could still see Mary, who was well into her lecture. The cloud resolved itself into a view of the private glen they visited while in the dream state. Within the cloud, she could see images of herself and Lance that turned and addressed each other mentally. The physical Lance visibly relaxed, as his face showed more alertness. Crystal felt a little tug inside herself that said, "Power being used," and drew on some external power to supplement it. She was operating at the limit of her experience here, but as Amber had said, if thee can imagine it, thee is halfway to doing it. Crystal's imagination ran to technical terms such as batteries and chargers, but that didn't seem to matter as much as the ability to will things to happen. The mini-lecture ended, and the exercises began, as Mary asked her assistants to demonstrate the first of today's exercises. Lance floundered through the exercises, and Crystal was busy augmenting his senses and guiding the spirit extensions of his hands. Mary had said that, as they were a team now, any exercise that Lance was trying to learn, she would be allowed to assist in, while there were a few times when Crystal would be asked to perform some maneuver on her own. By the end of the exercise period, she was tired and sweaty from channeling so much energy into Lance, and Lance was in a similar condition, probably from expending too much of his personal energy instead of the available external power. Crystal had anticipated this, and booked a room at a bathhouse in town that Lace had suggested. Fed by hot springs, its mineral waters were considered therapeutic for a number of ailments. As they departed the yard, She drew a ticket from her pouch that indicated one bathing suite reserved for an entire evening. "Oh, Chris, thee needn't have," Lance exclaimed, but she could see that she had taken his mind off the afternoon's toil. Dropping their books off, they went out of the front gate, still open at the hour, and strode into town. The suite she'd reserved was a lavish affair with a hot tub, a cold tub, and a sideboard laden with food and non-alcoholic beverage. They stepped inside, and Crystal bolted the door. The hot tub lent a warm and humid atmosphere to the suite. Lance looked at Crystal with a sort of hunger in his eyes, and reached to unclasp her cape. Shortly, water spilled over the side of the tub as Lance helped Crystal into the water, then followed himself. They sat together on the submerged bench, with the steaming water up to their shoulders, and chilled beverages on the ledge behind them. They soaked in silence for the time, and finally Lance spoke. "Thank thee, my love, for being so thoughtful. I would never have thought of hiring a bath suite, but it's exactly what thee and I need just now, relaxation and privacy. I didn't realize that the magic at thy level was so tiring. In Mary's other section, the one for the babies that will never progress, I'm afraid, it was hard enough, but as nothing to this afternoon's toils. How ever does thee manage it, and so easily?" Crystal thought carefully before answering. "A word of advice kindly meant, my love." Lance nodded. "You are trying to use only your personal energies to do all the work. Draw on outside energies to replenish your own. There's a lot to learn about this business, isn't there? Seriously, though, I've heard all the lectures. I just can't seem to do it. Lance, maybe your problem is that too many people have told you that you can't do it. You've begun to believe them. I know otherwise. You perform best when you let go and let the process accomplish itself, with you to supervise. Exert your will, and the spirit filaments will do the rest. As it was, I was replenishing your energies from my own, and then from additional power that I called upon. It's the same method I use when I haven't had enough sleep or too much to drink." She chuckled. She called on a burst of power and sent it in Lance's direction. Some of the fatigue dropped from his face. "Lance, I have an idea. Relax, and let's see if we can call up the dream state. It'll help. I'm sure it will." She led the way by assuming a light trance and focusing on his eyes. The dreamy look appeared on her face, and seeing it, Lance relaxed further and was able to meet her eyes. The room fogged and disappeared. In a moment, a familiar sunny glade came into being around them. A man and a woman sat naked with their backs against a rock made warm by the sun. Their bodies were freshly damp, but the sun was quickly drying them. In the trees overhead, birds sang, and a hawk made lazy circles in the sky. "Lance, my love, welcome to our dream." Her voice in his brain was soft but firm. "It had been suggested by both Amber and Mary that we invoke this dream state intentionally. It facilitates communication between us, generally at the emotional level, but one can talk plainly with only a small effort. Pretend you've had too late a night and need to shake off drowsiness. You won't disrupt the dream unless you really want to." In a moment, Lance looked more alert, and the dream remained stable about them. "This is the first time we've come here a purpose, eh, Chris?" "Yes, Lance. Now that we're here and properly awake, there's a thing or two I'd like to try. First, I'd like to stroll about a bit and get a measure of the size of this place. We've come here a few times already, and it's always been the same place, though it seems to have been created out of a combination of both our dreams." She led the way, and soon they traversed the perimeter of the little glade. Dense forests surrounded it in all directions, and an occasional path led away from the clearing. They returned to the warm rock and sat down again. "Now, Lance, your cares and worries should not have followed you to this place, and you should be perfectly relaxed here, correct?" Lance nodded. "Now tell me again about your experience this afternoon." Lance looked at her calmly. "Thee was right. Back in the hot tub. I suppose we're still in the hot tub?" "Well, we are either in the hot tub or getting something to eat. Personally, I found that our bodies behave themselves very sensibly while we're here. At least, while we are behaving ourselves. Do go on. I was fighting by main force to twist the lines into the right shapes. Say, this is great. I can say just what I feel here. He let out a long, explosive sigh. This was Amber's idea, coming here? It was Mary's idea, mostly. She laughed. Want to know something? Amber's never been in a place like this, but Mary has. Only the heart-bonded like us can come here. Lance looked at her, and then he laughed, and laughed again. Well, I guess I'm one up on old Amber now. Honestly, trying to tell everyone that she's been everywhere and done everything, magically at any rate. So, Amber's never been heart-bonded? Oft married, but never bonded. Mary, on the other hand, her bondmate died some years ago, and teaching filled the void. Crystal stopped for a moment. I'm starting to get grave doubts about Amber, she said finally. A good bit of what she said just doesn't add up. Now that you mention it, I must say I think I agree with you. Amber's talked about a healer's circle. Just what is this organization? Lance looked thoughtful. It be no part of the university now. 'Tis something formed between some of the townsfolk and some religious types. I'm not sure exactly what its other affiliations are, but it's not highly regarded at the university. At one time, it was a respectable entity, but of late it seems to have less of a reputation. The deans are not in favor of Amber associating with it, but they can't control her private life. It may have some impact on her tenure, but Amber has built up a lot of influence, particularly through some rather shady channels. Crystal continued. Now, do you think you are up to trying some of your lessons again? Here? What, here? Now? Will it be all right? Perfectly. I've discussed this very carefully with Mary. I'll have you know that while Amber is my official advisor, with the backing of the deans, Mary has been giving some very useful private counsel herself, and in matters concerning heart bonds, you'd better believe who I'd listen to. She paused a moment. First off, you don't have to close your eyes. Just visualize the spirit lines, and they will appear to both of us. Secondly, you can touch them, hold them, move them with your hands. Your dream hands, of course. But they seem real here. But once you learn to bend the lines to your will, then you won't have to do so much direct manipulation. Watch me now. Filaments of the spirit wind appeared within the glade. Lance could see the two linking him with Crystal, and others as well. Crystal reached a hand out and grabbed a free line, pinched it, twisted it, let it go. Then she stretched out her palm. This time a line jumped right into it, and she closed her fingers around it. Finally, she let the line go, and it formed a series of complex geometric shapes on its own before rejoining the cloud. That's amazing, said Lance. What's more, I could follow all thy thought processes. Crystal nodded. That's one reason a majority of great magi throughout the history of this planet have had a companion, a heart-bonded partner. The partner may not have achieved the same prominence, but their presence was invaluable. There haven't been many great magi of late. Perhaps one reason the evil is on the rise again. Now you try. I'll walk you through the exercise, mentally, but it will be you doing it this time. As Crystal had done, Lance brought the spirit filaments into view, then grasped and released one. Then he held out his hand and paused. Very slowly, a line sorted itself out from the rest of the bunch and crept toward his palm. As soon as it was over his palm, he quickly clutched at it, then released it. Leisurely it rose into the air, formed a triangle briefly, then departed suddenly. Not like thy stellar performance, my love, but it will do, I guess. Do? Do? More than that, my love. Do that for Mary, and she'll truly be impressed. We will try this again, outside the dream. But come, we've been here long enough. Our bodies await. Crystal clapped her hands twice, and the bathing suite reappeared. They still sat in the hot tub, but a trail of puddles led to the sideboard, and half the food was gone. Lance looked over at the time candle. Only an hour to closing. My, we were in that dream a long time. He patted his now full belly. Been eating, have we? That dream state takes some getting used to. I wonder where the path leads to. I suspect we'll find out one day. Right now, I think we'd better get back to campus. This was truly a relaxing evening. Did Mary enjoy the dream state like we do? That's one thing she wouldn't tell me. She says it's harmless and only occasionally embarrassing, but otherwise we'll have to find out for ourselves. Lance stepped out of the tub and extended a hand to Crystal. They took a brief plunge in the cold tub, then dried each other and got dressed. Lance led the way through town. Passing the square, they looked at it, then at each other. Lance led the way down to the river, and they passed the grove where they had first kissed. They paused for a moment, then proceeded onward to the west gate of the college. The same guard opened the door as before, but this time he had more to say. What? The same girl still? He winked. Lance, old man, thee must be slowing down, the guard guffawed. Lance cuffed him on the ear. Back in the room, they quickly prepared for bed. Curled up, this time in Crystal's bed, Lance spoke quietly to Crystal. Feels like I've hardly said 2 words since we left the dream. But let me get this straight. I can practice there. Thee can coach me mind to mind. And when we get back to reality, I'll be able to do it for myself? Yes, love, Crystal replied sleepily. Have a little faith in yourself. Now go to sleep. Thank you for joining today's episode of Read with Rave. I apologize for my stumbling, but I'm working on reading better, so I appreciate your patience. If you liked, please comment down below if you want me to do more of these. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to splash the bell icon so you never miss another video, and I will catch you all on the next wave. Bye!